Hi everyone, I'm Snehal Pradhan, a former India cricketer, now commentator, writer, and broadcaster. I am starting a new series on my YouTube channel, a series of conversations which I'm calling hashtag I learned a lot, because these are conversations with people I find interesting, people I encounter, and people who I can usually learn a lot from. This particular conversation is a very interesting one because it's not from the cricket world. I recently went on a trek to the Himalayas, to the mountain, the summit of Kedarkantha, and there I encountered Pallavi. And Pallavi is one of the many female trek leaders working with the organization India Hikes, who I had gone with, and I found it really interesting that there is a woman who is in this leadership role in this very outdoor, very traditionally male-dominated space. And so I invited Pallavi for a chat to learn a little more about her, her life, her career, and her experiences as a trek leader, as a woman in this traditionally male role. And this is the conversation with a very interesting personality. I hope you enjoy it.
Cool. So Pallavi, firstly, thanks so much for coming on, doing this. I'm so glad we can do it in a video call, so everybody can see you and they can see one of the reasons. I mean, why I had this thing that we should interview you, because when I saw you, let me give everyone a context. The first time I saw Pallavi was when my batch was climbing Kedarkantha and we reached the summit base camp, which is the base camp where we stay and then go up to the summit. And she was leading the batch before us who had already done the summit. They had come down and they were going off, and I saw her and I was like, firstly, you have that personality which kind of grabs attention, and the second thing was, wow, that's a trek leader and that's a woman, which is not something I expected to see when I signed up for a trek to Kedarkantha, because if all the staff in our trek were men, and I thought, okay, that must be normal. There must be very few women trek leaders, and I bumped into one. So that was the first time that I thought, okay, this will be an interesting conversation for sure. And I'm so glad we are following up on that. So firstly, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. This is, I think it's wonderful that you're doing this, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Cool. So I like we just talking before recording that until now I knew only your first name. Now, just like 10 seconds ago, I've learned your last name. And besides that, I know very little about you. So why don't you tell me and us a little bit of the basics? Where you're from, what your current official role is, if you don't mind, how old you are, and then we'll kind of get into how maybe you've gotten to this point.
Sure. So what's the first question? Where I'm from?
Where you're from? Yeah, let's start with that.
I usually ask my trekkers this. Now I'm on the other side. So I get how they feel. Where I'm from, I'm basically a native of Andhra. My parents, one of them is from Vizag, one of them is from Hyderabad. But my dad was in the central government, so I was born in Tamil Nadu, and then I grew up around a bunch of different places. Trichy, Chennai, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Haryana, MP, Andhra, and now I'm in Uttarakhand. So that's me growing up. That's my history. And currently I'm working as a trek leader in India Hikes. I am leading teams on the Kedarkantha trek, starting from Gechuan, which is a village in Uttarakhand, which is a base camp, and I'm 25 years old.
Nice. So you said that you are the trek leader, and before this, when we were chatting, you asked me to look up something called outdoor leadership, and the few other trek leaders who I connected with on Instagram, they also have, they don't have trek leader in their bio, they have outdoor leader, as if there's a very big difference between those two. And it's funny that we're talking about Instagram like it's LinkedIn, but that's exactly how they describe themselves. So what is a trek leader or outdoor leader? What is being a trek leader kind of entail? Just for people who have never trekked before.
Right. So usually when you go trek, not even on a trek, when you just trek, most people in the world trek on their own. They don't they don't go in organized groups. At least globally, in Western countries, the culture is that you just pack your own stuff, you drive to a place, you do your hike or you camp, and then you come back. But in India, the sport is relatively lesser known. And so that's where India Hikes, the organization itself, started. Arjun sir, he started organizing. He used to trek himself. And then he discovered trekking, and he's like, oh, let's take more people on treks. And so, through word of mouth, he started organizing treks for people. And he was the one who started, essentially, he was the first trek leader of India Hikes. And so now, more than a decade later, where we organize treks, we want people to trek, right? And a lot of people don't know how to trek. They don't know where to trek. And trekking is a sport, unlike the general notion. A lot of people tend to think it's a leisurely activity.
Yeah, Nitesh and me actually had a debate about this. Sorry to cut you in, but just Nitesh, who is the trek leader of my batch, I was going on, no, yeah, trek cannot be a sport. There has to be, if you want to qualify something as a sport, there has to be like a World Cup. I don't see any trekking World Cups.
Okay. Wow. Okay then. Interesting. Is that, I'm guessing that's coming from the cricketer in you.
Yeah. That's just me, splitting hairs. But we had a good conversation about it.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So so since trekking is a sport, we want more people to engage in this sport. We organize treks for beginners, we organize treks for everyone, experienced trekkers. And the thing about trekking is that it is a sport that has risks. It is a sport that can teach you a lot, as in the outdoor world itself, because trekking is, a sport in it's an outdoor sport. So the world of the outdoors is something that can teach you a lot of skills, like a lot of soft and hard skills. Soft skills that can make you grow in life, like personal growth, right? So what trek leaders, or rather outdoor leaders, as we call ourselves, what we do is, we are responsible for the medical and physical safety of trekkers. Because a lot of them are inexperienced. They're their first time. They don't really know what to expect. High altitude comes with its own risks.
Yeah.
And not just high altitude, the act of walking on a trail itself, like physical risks, medical risks, psychological risks. So as trek leaders, we handle and manage and mitigate these risks for our trekkers, for our team. And besides that, to help our trekkers tap into the potential that the outdoors have, which is to teach you leadership, to teach you teamwork, to teach you problem solving, time management, personal management. I could go on. There's an endless list of things that the outdoors can teach you. So what we as trek leaders do is we design certain experiences on the trek that nudge our trekkers to think or reflect in a certain direction, and then gain these treks, they gain these skills and knowledge of the outdoor world, of themselves. So that is essentially what a trek leader or an outdoor leader does.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to describe it, because I didn't really think about that part where you're very subtly nudging people towards these skills rather than, explicitly teaching them. And the example that comes to mind with our batch and the Kedarkantha trek is that once we got to the summit, the trek leader, Nitesh, he handed out postcards to all of us. And I don't know if this is something you do for every batch or this is something that just Nitesh did, but it was an experience designed, or it was an activity designed for us to reflect in that moment we're on the summit, and we have achieved what we've set out to achieve, rather than just take photos and be with each other. It was designed to be with ourselves, which I love that activity. And so that's what comes to mind when you describe what you do, besides the temperature checks, the specific oxygen checks that you keep doing every night on the trek, carrying those oxygen cylinders to make sure that no one is low on oxygen or anything like that, making sure the medication is right. So it's a very high skill job, obviously, very high responsibility job. How did you come into this? Because I know very few 25-year-olds who take up such high risk and high responsibility jobs.
Yeah. I think prior to stepping in, I don't think I fully fathomed how exactly high risk and high responsibility this would be. But now I know. And you asked how I actually got into this, right?
Yeah. So how did you become a trek leader? Especially, I'm assuming this is young for a trek leader, because it seems young for anyone who would take such responsibility. I'm sure that in the batch that you take on the trek, there are probably usually you're supervising and responsible for people a lot older than you. And
yes.
Like what were you doing before this, and how did you kind of get into this?
Right. So I, like growing up, I'd always wanted to work in social development. And so I wanted to work in that sector. And wherever I got the opportunity, either public, private, or the government, I was open to opportunities everywhere, and I'd gotten the opportunity to work in an international nonprofit. So I was working, prior to doing this, I was working in an international nonprofit for 3 years. I was working with farmers, helping them set up farmer producer companies in the agricultural sector, and teaching them how to manage the business, and also doing business development for the nonprofit itself. And then eventually, I think as my own exposure and understanding grew, it felt a lot like an industry in itself, in the sense that, we were doing it because at the end of the day, end game is money. And I am somebody who's extremely values driven. And that's why I wanted to work in social development. And so I sort of lost my faith in, like the nonprofit sector in itself. And the sector itself is very small in India. Like we have a lot of people who want to do the same things and very few jobs. So as is the case with, I think, most of most sectors.
Interesting.
But
I would never have imagined that there's more demand than there is supply in a social development job. I always feel that there aren't enough.
No. I meant that there is more supply than demand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I misunderstood.
So after a point, like I was considering, like, okay, this is clearly not what I want to do. What do I want to do next? And so once I quit my previous job, the first thing I did was book a trek with India Hikes. And I had, like no, nothing else. I thought of nothing else, but I was like, okay, let's book a trek first. And I'd actually started trekking 10 years ago with my sister. So I have two sisters, and they're both elder. And my first sister was the one who introduced me to trekking. And ever since then, I've been a huge proponent, fan, whatever you want to call it, of trekking. And so anytime somebody says, Pallavi, let's go up, I'm up for it. And because of work, I hadn't gotten the chance to in the last 3 years. So which is why that's what I did. And on that trek, my trek leader was female. And so trek leaders are usually added a day before you reach base camp, right? Like on the WhatsApp group.
Right.
And when I saw Ayushi is she is a trek leader, senior trek leader in India Hikes and a core team member. When I saw Ayushi's name, I was like, wow. I told my sister, I was like, wow, there is a female trek leader. I was pumped. I was overjoyed, and I couldn't wait to meet her, because even I wasn't expecting it.
Right.
And when I met her, instantly, I was just like, I instantly had like immense respect for her. How she carried herself, how she led the team, and sustainability plays a big role in my life. And that's one of the reasons I chose to trek with India Hikes. And then and everybody in India Hikes, we're all like, we all live sustainably. Like, we strive to live in the most sustainable way possible. And she herself is a sustainable champion. And so she and I, we just started having a lot of conversations about sustainability, and then eventually we started talking about the values at India Hikes. And it it almost seemed unreal because the 3 of the 4 core values that she described as India Hikes having are values that I hold very dear to myself. And so I was like, it almost seemed like the universe is telling me, hey, Pallavi, this, you look at this, consider this. And so, and then I started asking her about check leading itself, and what the job is like, what it entails, how much money do you make, what does someone do after they become a check leader after India Hikes. And so I was either supposed to do this, so I applied. I just went ahead. I like a shot in the dark, I worked on my application, and simultaneously I was trying to like apply for my master's as well abroad. And then in fact, until India Hikes asked me in the application, where do you see your career growing in the next 5 years? And incidentally, then also I started looking up a lot of other check leaders profiles, and I saw outdoor leader. I'm like, hey, what's outdoor leadership? I hadn't known that about something called outdoor leadership. And one of the reasons why the role of a check leader drew me was the leadership aspect of it. Was that you get to learn leadership skills in such an environment. I'd always wanted to work on my leadership skills and learn leadership skills, but not in a very typical business environment. And naturally, like growing up, I'd always been sporty as a kid. Like I'd look forward to like PT period as much as I like had to like sit and study and stuff. So and I'd be one of those few girls who was always playing in like a huge gang of boys because none of the other girls. Yeah, you relate.
Totally relate.
So I was I'm sorry. I think we lost. The electricity is gone. You can't see me right now.
I'm getting a very
life of a tech leader. Oh, thank you. Can I keep this? Yes. Thank you.
must-haves in trekking bag. Torchlight.
Yeah. A fellow tech leader gave me this. Where was I? Yeah. So
the only girl amongst many boys.
Yes, the only girl amongst many boys. So I thought, okay, I mean, like here is this amazing job that I think I would be good at. I think that I can learn a lot, and it lets me be in my element. And even when I was trekking, I think trekking brought out the best version in me, the best version of myself. And I was like, hey, if that's who I get to be, if I get to talk to people about values, if I get to learn leadership skills, and if I get to contribute to bringing in more sustainable living into the world, why not? And so I applied, I went for it, and I threw my master's aside, and I said, okay, 2 years doesn't matter. Let's explore and let's see where this goes. And so far it's going well.
Nice. So how long have you been a trek leader with India Hikes?
I joined in October, so it's been about 4 months.
Okay, so you're a fresher almost.
Yes. And very recently, in fact, yesterday I have been promoted from an assistant trek leader to a trek leader.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Rising star, very much a rising star. Superb.
Everything. Yeah.
So one of the things that again blew me away, the first thing that blew me away was the fact that there's a woman leading a trek, because any outdoor activity is usually stereotypically dominated by men, but even practically there is the factor, like I'm playing women's sports, and I know that I'm never going to be able to bowl 140 k's per hour because men are physically much stronger than me. So on a mountain, I am going to face that reality, and I'm going to be very realistic about the fact that a male is more likely to have better physical fitness than a female, or the average male, the average female. Therefore you wouldn't expect a high risk, high responsibility role to to be held by a female. The fact that you were in that role, blew me away. And then talking to Nitesh a little more about it, our trek leader, he told me that India Hikes actually have, I think, 13 out of 28 trek leaders are women. And that was like a double blow my mind. I'm like, this something's going on here. So what's going on at India Hikes? And that there is this environment where you have almost a 50-50 split in a role which is usually probably 80-10 or even 80-20 or 90-10 is what you would see as the norm.
Yeah. I think at India Hikes, I had the same question for my own trek leader, Ayushi. I was like, why? How are there so many women? And she says it was a very conscious decision on India Hikes part to hire more women as trek leaders, because I remember another male trek leader actually telling me that for the longest time it used to be only men. And then the men came together and they, thought about, should we have more women? Should we get women into the outdoors? Is it something they can handle? And what seemed hilarious to me was that it was a bunch of men, sitting and deciding, as is the case in most of these. Yeah, which is hilarious. But and then slowly one or two women started check leading. And what I think the organization also noticed is that women make great check leaders, because the aspect of check leading, a huge part of check leading is actually people management and time management. And just management in general. You're constantly managing things, you're managing people. So as much as the sport requires strength and endurance, which all of us work on. And of course, like you rightly pointed out, men are like physically, biologically stronger than women are. But in most of the checks that we run, it is, if our fitness is the average of the team that we are leading, that is good enough, because we are not in a competitive sport. We're not here because our fitness doesn't define how much we succeed in this career on this sport. It is imperative. It definitely rests on our fitness. But a huge part of the job is to also manage people, is to read people, understand people, and manage a lot of things. And I think India Hikes realized that women are very good natural managers. And so once the organization started seeing more women excel and be great check leaders, I think they thought, okay, you know what, now it's time to up our ratio. Like we should aim for 40 or 50. And so we have been actively recruiting more female women as check leaders, and that's why you see the numbers now.
Nice. That's so good. And I mean, something else that Nitesh pointed out is that it makes such a big difference when India Hikes as an organization has, I believe, two co-founders, one of whom is Arjun Mujumdar, and the other, his co-founder is a woman. So it makes a lot of difference when you have a woman, like you said. It's not all men in a room on behalf of the women who are affected by those decisions. That I suppose does also make a huge difference. I mean, have you felt that from the inside?
About what?
About the fact that having a woman as a co-founder or in that one of those leadership roles does make a difference in the culture that the organization itself adopts.
Absolutely. I think it does make a huge difference. But surprisingly, what I've noticed is that the culture itself at India Hikes is, at least in the office, which is where like the decision making teams or the leaders of the organization, the Bangalore office has a lot more women than men do. So in these leadership and decision making roles, and so how how do I put this? That has definitely made the organization more accessible to me. But personally, I wouldn't, because again, I don't know how it typically is. So I don't have something to compare it to, I would say, in something that is actually I do. Considering my previous organization, there was one female leader, everyone else in all the leadership positions were men. But I think as an organization, we have been culturally very accommodating of women's needs. I know that sounds a little weird when I say it that way, but you don't really feel like they treat you differently.
Yeah, and I totally get that, because I'm like comparing my experiences with cricket administrators. They are the people who take decisions which affect us, the players, the most. It's an overwhelmingly male environment, overwhelmingly an environment where women are almost looked on as an unnecessary burden. So I can see, how the words you used made the organization more accessible. You go to the office and you don't feel like people are thinking, when will she leave?
Yeah, or that my questions are unimportant, or just like dismiss me instantly because I have I'm demanding a certain set of things that males generally wouldn't. So yeah.
So I totally get that. And what you're saying is really important, in that it makes a difference when there are so many women there in an organization. At the same time, like you said, it's on the basis of fitness, on the basis of your leadership skills, and not like on the basis of women for the sake of women, but something that you really see that this person, how they would fit in that role, almost irrespective of gender.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's something I found really cool about India Hikes. And you mentioned the 4 values of India Hikes and how 3 of them really resonated with you. Nitesh shared those 4 values with us, and I found them really cool values. And I'd really like to ask you to share those values, and if you can tell us which were the ones that really struck a chord with you.
Yes. So our 4 core values are live sustainably, be fit, be humble, and show care. So in a sense, sustainability, humility, fitness, and care. And 3 of them that had always been important to me are sustainability, fitness, and humility. Care is something that didn't come very instinctively, considering I'm the youngest in my family, and I've always been taken care of. So it's a quality and value that I'm learning and growing in towards. But sustainability, humility, and fitness have been a huge part of my life. Like sustainability ever since I went on my first trek. Fitness, as a kid, like I said, I was always sporty, and my entire family were very. Fitness is not just physical health, right? And physical health is tied to what you eat, how you look after yourself and your body and nutrition. And that is something my family consistently, like we've always focused on. I even wrote in my application, I was like, my mother, she would prioritize nutrition over taste. So the food in my house is never the best tasting food in the world, but it is definitely the most nutritious food in the world. So in that way, like fitness has always been a part of like who I am, and humility as well. I think like my dad, he's a retired civil servant, and so being a civil servant, you experience a lot of privileges and benefits that come with being that way. And and I've had the opportunity to live in like big cities, and I've had the opportunity to even like travel outside the world. So it's just something I've imbibed like growing up. And so yeah, like you said, those are the three values that I resonate with very strongly, that drew me.
Nice, super. So one thing that I'm hoping that people who would want to become trek leaders, and especially young women who would want to become trek leaders, might find this conversation later and might definitely find it interesting. And one of the challenges of being a woman in an outdoor work environment is something that I've also had to kind of navigate over my playing career when I was playing, was how you basically can manage your period when you're in an outdoor environment, and that can be challenging. It's obviously a challenge that men don't have to deal with, and I'm sure this is a question that will come to the minds of young women who might think about being a trek leader. What does that look like?
Firstly, I would say that each woman experiences her period differently. And I want to start with that because for me, my period has never been troublesome, in the sense that I don't get like these excruciating cramps, or like it's not as it is, as I know it is for some of my friends, where when they're on their period, they just cannot move, like they can't get out of their bed because that's how bad it is for them. So in that way, I would say my body works differently. So I would say, for lack of a better word, that quote unquote advantage. um, so that is one, I would say, like all of our bodies are different. And secondly, there's, ever since I went on my trek with India hikes, and after my conversations with Ayushi, she told me that all the women in India hikes, not just trek leaders, in India hikes, we use menstrual cups for our period, because it is the most sustainable option out there, and it is also the healthiest, I would say, because sanitary pads come with their own set of issues that we don't know, where long term they're really not good for your health. So they do have their own risks. So so that's how we manage our periods on treks. We use the menstrual cup, and you don't even know that it's there. And so you're able to trek very, very comfortably and travel, and you eventually you almost get used to perioding this way. So that is another point. And third, I would say that organizationally, if ever a female trek leader is on her period and she's not, and she has a team coming and she has to go on a trek, we can exercise the option of letting our slope managers know, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to take my team, so can someone else do that? And they will say, sure, Pallavi, we can do that for you, let's figure this out. So even organizationally, that space is created where if you're a woman, you're on your period and you cannot do this trek, that's okay, we'll get someone else to do it for you. So that is the third aspect. And another thing that I want to add is because my body works like the way it does when I'm on my period, even in college. So I used to be a dancer, and when I used to, the electricity is back. I used to train. We used to train a lot in our dance society, and every day we'd work out for 2 hours. And so they didn't cut me any slack for being on my period. They'd be like, I'm sorry, you're going to do that plie for 200 seconds. I don't care if you are on your period or not. So that's sort of like, made me like mentally tougher about dealing with and how I see my own period right now. Like, because I've done a lot of strenuous activity while on my period.
Yeah.
And I've even checked while on my period. In fact, in the past 3 months, I have led teams and I have shadowed trek leaders while on my period. So with that 10 kg backpack, and it's been okay for me.
Right.
So I would say it's been comfortable, and if at any point it does get uncomfortable, I know I can take a call, and I know I can rely on other people. So yeah.
Nice. That's interesting and probably important. And something I find interesting is that space that's created for a day where you just can't, or a time when you just can't. And again, contrasting with my experiences in very much like you're expected to train, you're expected to play, you're expected to do exactly the same activities when you're on your period, because the thinking is, agar match mein hua to kya karegi. So you have to be kind of prepared for that. Although I don't think that's a very healthy way to go about it, and it is changing now with the current crop of athletes. But I can see where um, it is something that needs to be taken into account when you're working in an outdoor environment or working in a physical occupation.
Yes, absolutely.
So then a good thing to ask is, what is this occupation? Can you like describe a week or a day in the life of a trek leader? What is it that you do? Because I'm personally someone who doesn't really enjoy the cold. And you are sometimes working in environments which are like -10, probably. Kedarkantha will be crazy cold right now.
Yeah.
And there's probably a very diverse very diverse environments that you have to work in. Must be super hot in some trek. It might be like Kedarkantha, super cold. What is the life of a trek leader like in your case or in general?
Wow. It is it is a question that doesn't have an answer with a full stop, in the sense that it's like I could go on and on, but I would say, so if like to describe a day maybe in the life of a check leader, you wake up before your checkers, you wake up early, and you obviously you meet with your kitchen team, and then you figure out what plan you have for the day. You are the one to like make your bed, or your sleeping bag in this case, and then make sure you are ready before all of your trekkers. Because the minute you step out of your tent, you can't step back in again, because you have so much to do. So you're constantly coordinating with your staff members, you're coordinating with your trekkers, trying to get them, like helping them to get their stuff together, and explaining the trail to them. I'm telling you, like, literally what I do every day. But it is, I would say, the life of a trek leader is one with a lot of uncertainty, because stuff is always changing. And when you're working in the outdoors, weather, especially in a sport where weather plays a huge role in you moving forward, so decisions are being taken on, say, an hourly basis, with bad weather. So you deal, or people are falling sick, or your team members are falling sick, or like there's a lot of situations that like you're just thrown into. So you become very comfortable with uncertainty, but you also learn to think 3 steps ahead and think in multiple scenarios. So that is one. One is that it is extremely people oriented, because I'm not working with the help of a device. I am working with people. I'm working for people. So it's emotionally, it can get emotionally and mentally also, it can get a little exhausting, because you're dealing with so many people, and you're meeting 20 to 25 people every week, and you're getting to know them at this very personal level, or at least that's the intention. And then you detach, and then you meet like a 20 set of new team members again, and then form that connection and let go. And we're also away from home, so we stay at the base camp, we live at the base camp, and some of us go back home like once in 3 months, or once in 6 months, or once in 8 months, depending on the schedule of checks in season. So it is it comes with a lot of personal sacrifice, in the sense that I'm not accessible to my friends whenever they want me. I am not accessible to my loved ones, not just my friends, family, friends, anyone, the minute they want me. So, it is a lot of personal sacrifice in that way. I'm not living in a city. I live in a village where there are only houses. There are no shops. And so, day in and day out, you eat a certain kind of food. And a lot of us check leaders are from cities where it's, you name it and you'll get it. Right.
Yeah.
So it is also a very minimalistic lifestyle where, like, I sometimes, in fact, in Gachwan, you don't even have like network. Like, so internet, something as basic as internet is something that you don't have, something that you take for granted. And so you learn to live with a lot less, and you're a lot more grateful and appreciative of the things that you have been given in life. So that is one. It is also a minimalistic lifestyle. And I would say, yeah, this is about it. And I think with the weather, you just learn to deal with it. Like, you're just like, there's no way around it. It's cold, it's -5. You still got to get up and do your work. So just do it. You just, like, mentally, I think you become a lot tougher and definitely a lot more disciplined in life, I would say, because work depends on time, especially in the outdoors. If you don't stick to time, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So those are a few things.
Nice. So there's a couple of threads I want to pick up in that. The first one is, the life of a trek leader. What does it look like maybe 2 years from now? You mentioned the term slope manager before, which is what Nitesh, we found out what Nitesh was a slope manager, and we are like, oh, cool, we've got a slope manager as a trek leader. And my understanding is that trek leaders report to slope managers. But what is like a career progression of a trek leader if someone wants to do this, for their entire life, perceivably?
Mm-hmm. Right. So I would say outdoor leadership as such, as a career in India, is still in its, like, extremely nascent stages. I think of all the outdoor organizations itself, I would say very few have the role of a check leader. So if we're looking at it over a span of, say, 5 or 10 years, it's a growing industry, and let's hope there are more organizations. Let's hope we grow as well. So it is still, check leading is still in its nascent stages. And honestly, I think even at India Hikes, we are defining what check leading can be. We have an idea of what check leading can be, but we're putting more structure to it and saying, this is what it is, and etc. But in India Hikes, I can say that, so the first year, so we have this notion that we go about, is that it takes 8 months to become a check leader, to become a proper check leader, and or 8 months or 23 treks, 23 teams that you lead. That's what Arjun sir usually says. And so once you're done with your first year is when you've experienced each season, you've experienced different slopes, you've experienced different teams. So the first year is where you're observing and learning from your mistakes. The second year that you check lead, again, the same seasons and different checks, hopefully, because we run different checks in each season. The second year, you learn from those mistakes. So whatever you did wrong the previous time, you correct for, right? And you become better at your skill set. And the third year, which is so essentially after 2 years, you can segue into different teams that we have here at India Hikes. So we have the learning and development team, we have the experience team, we have the content team, we have the research and development team, we have the operations team. So you can enter any of these teams depending on your own skill sets and the need of the team. So that is one. And third, if you want to stick to being a check leader, the third year is where you start mentoring other check leaders. And so the third year is where you're refining, you're fine-tuning, refining, and simultaneously coaching and mentoring, incoming check leaders. So you sort of become a manager of sorts of check leaders. And eventually, after 3 years, say, which is when you've really gotten a hold of the organization, of operations, of check leading, is when you can become, even after, I would say, 2 years, you can become an assistant slope manager. And so an assistant slope manager or a slope manager, they are responsible for everything, for the smooth functioning and operations of that particular slope. Which includes check leaders, which includes kitchen staff, rentals, store in charge, the A to Z of everything that happens on that slope. So so that's what a career progression would look like for a check leader.
Nice. Okay. And the second thing that I wanted to pick up on what you said, like the life of a trek leader, which involves so much personal sacrifice. It almost sounds like being in the army, because what you said, the experience that you described isn't for everyone, where you're staying in a place where you might not have internet. And my friends and me, we were discussing this, that it's really, these people seem really cool for us who are spending 5 days with you. But what will their life look like? What must their life be like? What would the challenges of their life be like? Imagine being in a place where we aren't in touch with each other, and we can't be in touch with each other, and you can't be in touch with, like you said, your loved ones. These personal challenges seem like the biggest challenge of everything you've described so far. Because, fitness is something you can overcome. Weather is something you can overcome. People is something you can learn to handle. This doesn't seem to kind of change.
Yeah.
Is that accurate in your experience?
Yes, I would agree. I would definitely agree. And I think it's something I am still trying to manage and work around. And it's something we talk about also at India Hex. In these sessions called Life of a Check Leader, but but it is one with a lot of personal sacrifice, and I think what justifies it is different for different check leaders. Why they're in this, the why of like each person has their own why, and so because the why is strong, is what allows us to make these personal sacrifices. And in addition, I think you learn to work around it. Like, I'm somebody who decided that I did not want a city job because I wasn't a big fan of the lifestyle in a city. Sure, I love things in a city. In fact, right now I'm in Dehradun. Like, I'm walking on the road and I'm smiling because I do miss the city, and I miss my family. But I've been away from family for a long time. B, I've also been away from friends, given the nature of my previous job, where I was living in a village, and minus the network bit because I was constantly accessible. I'm used to that. And not being accessible all the time is definitely challenging. But given that I have like a trek schedule, I know when my team is coming, I know when I have time, when I don't have time, you just learn to work around it. Like, I'm actually going to get on a call with my friends after this because I've scheduled a weekly call with them so that we don't lose touch. Now, I mean, it's come to that, it's come to scheduling calls with family and friends, but like, we've all figured out our own ways of dealing with that issue. And the flip side is, I would say, because we live with, other India hikers, we live with other trek leaders, we're all at the same slope. So we learn to lean on each other. We sort of become each other's family, home away from home. So Shachi, who you met, who is the other female trek leader, she's like my sister, come best friend, come mentor, come, roommate, come everything right now. So I think we're all figuring out our own ways of managing that.
I'm wondering because I noticed this quality in Nitesh as well. does this kind of a lifestyle tend to lead to people who are very reflective, and you're away from the city, you're away from your mobile phone, you're away from the distractions that maybe not normal people but other people have.
That's okay.
But I'm thinking about, sometimes I find it hard to kind of go inside and really reflect, because there's just so much to react to. Does this kind of lifestyle almost lead to a slightly more reflective person? Do you see that in other trek leaders as well?
I think what I've noticed that it's the other way around. Or actually, I'd say there's a mix of both. I think I'm someone who's usually reflective as a person, and I think people who do reflect often are drawn to this. I think people who like disconnecting, people who, I mean, that's why we're in the outdoor world, right? Because we like the outdoors a lot more than we like the indoors. Or being on our phones or anything, and that's not to say that we don't, like a lot of us have social media profiles. We're very active on social media. We still love our Netflix. I don't I haven't. Sorry?
A deliberate decision?
Yes, I chose to get off of Instagram 2 years ago. I haven't used it for the past 2 years, and I feel a lot more at peace ever since that decision. I think it is that. I feel like, especially people that I've seen and like people I'm drawn to at India Hikes as well, I think culturally we are people who like reflecting, who like having that reflective space. So, yeah.
Nice. Interesting. There's probably one last question that I'll wrap up with. I don't want to keep you from your friends. What's you've been in this role 4 months now, and you've probably spoken to also other trek leaders. What's the most challenging situation either you have been in or you've heard of another trek leader being in, which really kind of stuck with you?
With other trek leaders, I think, wow, I could go on with like a list of scenarios, because each of us has gone through like some crazy situations.
We heard about that story where Nitesh actually saved someone's life. So that was like,
Go at Chala? Yes.
Yeah,
I know. Like, same here. So I think most of like the crazy situations we've come across are mostly medical ones. Where we are we're saving someone from, say, like a severe AMS, which turns into either HAPE or HACE. In fact, on my own, the second team that I was leading, one of my trekkers developed high altitude pulmonary edema, and in the middle of the night, in fact, he developed it after he came back to base camp, after summiting and after coming back. So at 3 in the night, one of the girls in the rooms next to she came running and she was like, Pallavi, a trekker is saying he's breathless and he can't breathe. Please come. We don't know what to do. And I immediately, like, I go with my own medical kit, and Dushyant also comes in. Dushyant is the slope manager at Gate 1 at KK now. And both of us go check on him, and we immediately know that he's having HAPE. And so we put him on oxygen. We speak at 4 in the morning, we wake up our staff. We're like, okay, we need a vehicle right now. We need to go to Pervela, which is 2 hours away. We need to put him on oxygen, and we need to get him admitted into the hospital because he needs medical attention. So we do that. We give him oxygen. We stabilize his oxygen levels a little. We give him LSDs, not those LSDs, but life-saving drugs. And then finally, I think at 6, he was stable. Like in that biting cold, it was also incredibly cold that morning. Me, Dushyant, and the trekker, we went to Pervela. We spoke to the doctors there. He rested, and it could have been a lot more serious, but it was one. It was a milder hip case. Hip is bad, but mild hip is better than severe hip. So, yeah, and then finally he left. He left for Dehradun. I kept following up with him, for the next few days. And he's fine now. He's doing absolutely fine. But that's just one like life-threatening situation that I had to manage in my own team. But besides this, Shachi herself, she saved so many trekkers' lives. She did Hamta Pass. She led 10 teams of Hamta Pass back to back, and she has saved multiple lives. She even had a trekker from another organ, like somebody who was trekking with someone else. She goes and checks their oxygen level in the middle of the night, and they're at 34. And so she stayed up all night. Yeah, she stayed up all night, tending to them, giving them oxygen, making sure that they stabilize and that they're okay and that they get medical attention. So most of the cases are, like life-threatening medical issues that we deal with. But otherwise, some of the other offbeat challenges I would say is, sometimes your entire staff decides to give up on you and you have to like manage the entire trek. That has happened on your own. It's not something you expect, right? Because you're working with them day in and day out. So that can happen sometimes, especially if you're working in Kashmir. You can get arrested for no reason. Yes, one of our folks, I mean, he's out now. He was put in for very stupid reasons. Yeah, so stuff like that. Stuff like that keeps happening.
Yeah. I think I'm going to stop you there. This is going to become an interview about why not to become a trek leader.
Okay, no. You can edit that out then.
No, just kidding. But yeah, it's interesting to know. This has been super, Pallavi. I mean, usually at this point, if I'm interviewing a guest, I would ask, where can people find you on social media? But obviously, people can't find you on social media.
Yeah.
So I will definitely point people to the India Hikes website. Huge amount of content that those guys put out, which is kind of how I discovered. And my friends and I discovered this particular trek. Our first Himalayan trek. Kedarkanda was wonderful. It was wonderful meeting you there. And thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time for this chat. I'm sure there's going to be one girl who looks at this and like how you looked at Ayushi is going to think, I can do this.
Whoever that is, I want to say you can. At whichever point, day or year she sees this, I want to tell her you can. You definitely can.
That is a great note to end. I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much, Pallavi.
Thank you. This has been lovely.